Psychology behind alcohol addiction. So, in this video, I'll talk about the definition of alcohol addiction, how addiction works, the RSD cycle. This might be new to you, but this is a very important concept to understand. Once you understand this, you'll understand so much about bad habits and addictions, not just alcohol addiction. Why people get addicted to alcohol, the impact of alcohol addiction, and finally, what you can do from a psychological standpoint to recover from alcohol addiction. So, first of all, the definition of alcohol addiction. So, any compulsive and impulsive, excessive behavior is indicative of addiction. In case of alcohol, compulsive and impulsive, excessive consumption of alcohol, where you feel that you have no control over your behaviors, that is an indicator that you're likely addicted to alcohol. Also, you have this preoccupation with alcohol. You keep thinking about it, you keep talking about it, which ultimately motivates you to consume it. And finally, continued use despite the negative consequences. So when you are while you are consuming alcohol, you may be blind to these negative consequences, as with other addictions. But once you're done with it, once you get that high, after you get that high, you feel bad, you feel guilty, because now you can see that there are some negative there are negative consequences to your behaviors. But despite that, you keep using alcohol. So next we'll talk about how addiction works. So this applies to all addictions, but I'll first talk about it in the context of food, and then I'll talk about it in the context of alcohol. So we have these natural reward systems in our brain that motivate us to approach the rewards in our environment. So what are these rewards? Anything that increases our fitness, anything that increases the odds of our survival and reproduction are rewards. For example, food, potential mates, socialization, avoiding dangers, all of these things are rewards, because they increase the likelihood of our survival and reproduction. And these rewards in the environment, these natural rewards, they motivate approach behavior. They motivate us to approach these rewards and get the value that they contain. Okay. So on the other hand, supernatural rewards lead to addiction. So what are these supernatural rewards? These are artificial rewards that hijack our natural reward systems. These are often man-made products that hijack our natural reward systems. Because they hijack our natural reward systems, they lead to excessive approach behaviors, which is basically addiction. So these supernatural rewards, also called supernatural stimuli. So what these are, as I said, these are artificial products. For example, to illustrate to illustrate how this works, I'll give you the example of food, as I said before. For example, naturally occurring foods, organic foods, we are motivated to approach them, and we are motivated to get the calories and nutrients that they contain, and we feel satiated when we have them. So this is how it's supposed to work. These are the how these are how we are supposed to approach these natural rewards. But when these foods are processed, when these are highly processed to make them more palatable, to make them tastier, to pack more calories in them, to add sugar, when sugar, salt, and salt is added to them, they are converted from natural rewards to supernatural rewards. Why they're called supernatural rewards? Because they generate a supernatural response in us. They generate a an excessive approach behavior in us, which is addiction. So this is how it works in foods. So basically, they hijack our natural reward system. The brain thinks, when this happens, the brain thinks it's increasing fitness, it's getting more calories, it's getting tastier food. But what about the negative consequences of eating these foods? We are fooled. Basically, our brain is gets fooled into thinking that it's increasing fitness, when if we look at it from a from a bird's eye view, from a long term perspective, they're actually doing more harm than good to us. They're ruining our health, they're wasting our resources, and so on. Now, the same thing applies to any addiction. Basically, any addiction, be it substance based addictions or behavioral addictions. Now, let's talk about alcohol, how alcohol fits into this framework. Alcohol is present in trace amounts in ripened fruits. So, when we eat fruits, we like bananas have a lot of alcohol in them, and grapes and other ripened fruits. So, we our bodies are evolved to digest alcohol because they are present in trace amounts in these natural foods. So, so far so good, but what people have done is that they have converted this or uh, tendency to approach these natural rewards. They have converted alcohol into a supernatural reward by increasing the amounts of alcohol that is present in these alcoholic beverages. The amount of alcohol that you see in this beverages, that is not present. Alcohol is not present naturally in those amounts anywhere. So it is a supernatural reward, which leads to addiction, which leads to a supernatural approach behavior, that is addiction. It basically hijacks our natural reward system. So when you consume alcohol, you're thinking you're increasing fitness, you're thinking you're getting those ripened fruits, but you're really not. You're in the long term harming yourself. So this is why alcohol is such a it's probably the worst of all addictions, because it hijacks our natural tendencies. I want to elaborate on the RSD cycle, because if you understand how it works, a lot about alcohol addiction and other addictions will become clear. So this RSD is this reward sensitization and desensitization cycle. I came up with this by there's a lot of research on sensitization, and there's a lot of research on desensitization, or you can call this withdrawal or tolerance. uh, that usually happens like in addiction. You develop a tolerance for those substances and withdrawal symptoms. So that is the desensitization part. There's also this sensitization. When you combine these, you understand what's going on, what's really going on in addiction. So basically, addictions are an adaptation to scarce and unpredictable rewards. So the rewards in the environments in which we evolved, the rewards that I was talking about, they were scarce and unpredictable. Because they were scarce and unpredictable, our brains had to develop psychological mechanisms or adaptations to make us jump on those rewards, to make us basically get all we can. So we have this get all you can program in our minds that activates whenever we find a reward in our environment. So this is why people hoard resources. This is why people cannot stop, and this is also why people cannot stop consuming alcohol, because we have this get all you can program. Why do we have this program? Because the resources in our evolutionary environments were scarce and unpredictable. So it was like, if you find it, just get all you can, just take it, just consume it all. So that's how we think, that's how it happens. So that's why this reward sensitization desensitization cycle exists. So what this cycle basically does is that first we seek the reward, we find and we see an reward in our environment. For example, alcohol, we seek it, we seek the reward. Then we get sensitized to it. Sensitization basically means we keep we pay attention to it, we keep thinking about it, we become preoccupied with it. Or so sensitization basically sticks the reward in your head, so that you can keep thinking about it. So you can keep so you can approach it, finally approach it and get the value from it. You attain after the sensitization process, you attain the reward. After you attain the reward, there is interestingly there's this desensitization, there is this tolerance. You develop tolerance for that reward, which means that you sensitization is wanting the reward and desensitization is not wanting the reward. Why do you not want the reward after you want it? Because if you keep wanting the same reward, you will not you will be satisfied, you will be uh, content with the reward, but the brain doesn't want you to do it, because You cannot be content and satisfied with the rewards you get because they are scarce and unpredictable. So the brain motivates you to keep pursuing the rewards, and to do that, it after you get the reward, it desensitizes to you to that reward, so that you can seek bigger and novel reward, so that you can consume more alcohol, so that, and when you do that, again this when you seek a bigger reward, again the sensitization process happens. Attain the reward, desensitization, then you seek a bigger reward, then uh, sensitization, attaining then you seek a bigger reward, and it keeps, this is a cycle that keeps growing and growing. This is the RSD cycle, and it applies to almost every evolutionarily relevant rewards, and which are really behind addiction. So like behind all our addictions there are evolutionarily relevant rewards. Okay, so I want to elaborate a little on this sensitization to alcohol, how it happens, like in detail. So it basically happens by associative learning, because rewards are so important for the brain, and we have this get all you can program in our mind. So the brain had to do all it could to motivate you to pursue rewards. And one way in which it does that is associative learning. So what that means is that whenever you whenever you approach a reward and attain it, your brain is like sort of keeps a close eye. Your brain keeps a close eye on everything that is surrounding that reward, on the context of that reward, on the environment of that reward. And what it does is that it pairs things in the context of that reward to the reward, so that the next time you are in that same context, so that next time you're in that same context, you anticipate the same reward, you think about the same reward, you crave the same reward, you're motivated to acquire that reward, because obviously the brain wants you to desperately go after these rewards. So these are what alcohol cues do to you. So these alcohol cues, or these triggers in the environment, these can be your friends who talk about, who you consume alcohol when you hang out with certain friends or at certain places. So these people, these places, these can all be cues that induce craving in you. Or there might be a particular shop that you go to consume alcohol, and every time you pass by that shop, it's a sort of a visual cue for you to start craving alcohol, because your minds want you to get that reward so bad. It associates these cues with the reward. So anytime you encounter a cue, which is very likely, it's more likely for you to encounter these cues than the reward itself. So if your mind makes you crave the reward when you encounter a cue which is more likely, you are more likely to get the reward, then you're more likely to go after that reward. That's how it works. Also, this elaboration intrusion theory, it also explains how this happens, how this craving happens. And this craving can be conscious or unconscious. Like there's some debate on whether it's conscious or unconscious. It can be both. So elaboration intrusion theory is basically like it says that the more you see a reward, the more frequently you get exposed to a reward, for example alcohol, the more you think about it. And the more you think about it, the more you're likely you are to approach that reward. So sensory imagery plays a very important role in this. So if those cues, if you encounter those cues, especially those visual cues, if you encounter those, you're very likely to want alcohol. You're very likely to pursue that reward. And it creates this preoccupation, as I said with earlier with alcohol, that you keep thinking about it. You keep thinking about it. And then that anticipation plays a huge role also, because these cues, because when you encounter these cues, it's not likely that you will get the reward soon after. There probably will be some time gap between you encountering a cue and you taking that reward. So during that time gap, this anticipation builds. So if you see a bottle of alcohol, you your mind links it to the reward of consuming alcohol, and then you keep thinking about it. And when you keep thinking about it, that anticipation of getting that reward keeps building, and eventually you cave in. You cannot resist that anticipation, and you cave in and you consume alcohol. So now, why people get addicted to alcohol? So It could be pleasure because it hijacks the reward system and induces unnatural or supernatural amounts of pleasure. So some people take it just to seek pleasure, for the pleasure's sake. But I think this is a bigger, this is a most important reason why people have alcohol, why people become addicted to alcohol, is they want to cope with the negative emotions. As we all know, modern life and modern environments are very stressful. We are not adapted to these environments, so they create a lot of stress for us. And this stress can be any stress, any type of stress, financial, relational, any type of stress. Because we face a lot of people face a lot of stress these days. Because the stress is so high, they need something potent to counter this stress, so they turn to alcohol. uh, because if you're feeling like, if you're feeling a stress of 9 out of 10, like at work you are feeling a stress level of 9 out of 10, and you cannot come home and have some like organic food that will give you a pleasure of 5 out of 10, or even 6 out of 10. That won't be enough for you. You have to get uh, equal or greater pleasure to counter this pain, this stress, this emotional pain. So you need to get a pleasure of like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, so that you can feel good about yourself. Another reason is amplifying positive emotions. You have seen this like in celebration, like people who celebrate, they're likely to, because it hijacks the reward system. It unnaturally and supernaturally, it makes you feel much better. So if you feel good after winning, for example, after winning a sports competition or something, or getting a promotion at work, you will want to celebrate by having alcohol. And it basically amplifies your positive emotions, because the positive effect, the pleasure that it induces is very strong. Research has shown that this may not lead to addiction, but it is likely, like, because if you do turn to alcohol to make yourself feel good, you might, it can easily spill over into this reason. But if you just do it, like if you occasionally uh, celebrate with alcohol, that might not be a problem for you. And some people have addictive personalities, like, which means they have low sensitivity to the negative effects of alcohol. Like when they have alcohol, they don't feel bad in their minds and bodies. So these people that have addictive, they have a genetic predisposition to not get addicted to alcohol, because not everybody who consumes alcohol gets addicted to it. On the other hand, people, some people have high sensitivity to alcohol, and these are people who, when they consume alcohol, they feel the negative events, they feel the negative effects in their bodies and their minds very potently, and they are, because they feel those negative effects, they immediately like, uh, they resist having that drink again. They're unlikely to get addicted. So that is another reason. Social factors, this is a social factors play a very important role in alcohol addiction. People so these are smoking, alcohol, you must have seen this in the media and the movies, or even in like when when you were in school or college, doing smoking, drinking, and doing other reckless behaviors, like driving driving fast and recklessly. All these behaviors are risky behaviors, and these risky behaviors, for some weird reason, these risky behaviors are seen as high status behaviors in humans. These are seen as uh, cool. This is why some people, they especially these adolescents and teenagers, they turn to alcohol because it makes them cool. They become they become that cool group in high school, that cool group that does all sorts of bad things, like smoking and drinking, all those other things. So because they want to be cool and they want to increase their social status and join this cool group, they fall into this alcohol addiction. And research has shown that people do who, at least for short term, meeting, people do find people who do these risky behaviors as attractive. There is research that backs that. Finally, it's the basically it comes down to the alcoholic identity, because when you have alcohol, when you've had it for a long time, like, it becomes part of who you are. It becomes You see yourself as an alcoholic. You have friends who are alcoholics. You hang out with co-workers who are alcoholics. So it becomes a part of your identity. It becomes who you are. You start bragging about it. You start telling people that this particular alcoholic drink is your poison, is your guilty pleasure, and it sort of becomes who you are. And then you, when you have this identity, you keep acting on it. You keep reinforcing that identity. So that also plays a very important role in alcohol addiction. Next, the impact. Because your brain has been fooled into thinking that it is increasing fitness, it is pursuing a major reward, alcohol becomes a central part of your life. You keep thinking about it, you keep talking about it, you keep putting resources, money, and energy into it. So it becomes a huge resources and energy drain for you. So that is the biggest impact, direct impact of it. Not to mention the negative health effects. There are a whole host of negative health effects related to excessive alcohol consumption. I'll not go into that in detail. Then there's unbalanced relationships, obviously, because you have devoted so much you have devoted so much of your resources and energy into this addiction. You don't have that energy to put into other pursuits and into your relationships or your goals or your hobbies. Obviously, those things will suffer because something is like occupying your bandwidth completely. This is important, the psychological effects. And when we do something, because you know consciously, when you're addicted, you know you're doing it unconsciously, impulsively, compulsively, because your brain doesn't want you to think, because the reward is so huge that your brain thinks it's pursuing a huge reward. It does not want to miss that reward. It wants to get that reward at all costs. It does not want you to think about the costs or the consequences of that reward. So, and it's completely like unconscious. Mostly it's unconscious, and it's impulsive and compulsive. Unconscious, impulsive, and compulsive behaviors, when they are costly, they obviously have a negative impact on their life, and we only become conscious of those negative effects when we're out of that impulsive mode and we're into this reflective mode. We're like thinking about our life, about our actions, about our behaviors. When we're in that mode, we are likely to feel guilty, shameful, and we feel like we are being a puppet being controlled by our addiction. So that does decrease self-respect, and it does decrease our self-esteem, because we want to be on our in the control of our own behaviors and our own life. And when something takes over uh, completely, or life completely, we our self-esteem gets lowered. So that and also because people see uh, alcoholics, like they perceive them negatively, and also that is also the reason why our self-esteem gets lowered. Of course, the social consequences, like for example, drunken driving and reckless driving. When you do that, even though you're trying to be cool, you are harming other people in the process, because you're basically turning off your prefrontal cortex. You're lowering your inhibitions, so you do all sorts of crazy stuff to harm other people. Finally, recovery. I think the first step should be unlearning alcohol cues. What that means is that the environmental cues that your brain has associated with alcohol consumption, you have to stop being in those environments. You have to stop. You have to basically disassociate alcohol consumption from those environments. You have to stop hanging out with people who drink alcohol. You have to stop going to places where you know that you're likely to consume alcohol. If you have a uh, uh, if you have a alcohol cabinet in your home where you keep alcoholic drinks, you could maybe turn that into a book cabinet. You could keep books in there and remove all those bottles, because those bottles, as elaboration intrusion theory says, those bottles, even if you uh, take a vow to not drink alcohol ever again in your life, but you keep seeing those bottles, if you keep seeing those bottles, you will keep thinking about them, and eventually you will consume alcohol. So out of sight, out of mind is real. It works. So next is eliminating or reducing stress by other means. So stress is usually caused by when you're facing a major life problem. So I recommend solving that problem head on, because when you do that, you will not resort to bad habits or addictions to feel good. You will just attack that problem head on. That is always the best way to approach any problem. But sometimes the stress is so high that you may not be able to immediately do something about it. You may have no clue how to attack that problem. In those scenarios, instead of turning to addiction, you can reduce stress by other means. Like some people swear by meditation, others say exercise helps them a lot. Yet others say that music is great for reducing stress. So anything you can do to reduce stress, those uh, or even like talking to friends, socializing, that can also reduce stress. Anything that can reduce stress will make you less likely to depend on alcohol to feel better. What is essentially required here is a shift in identity, because if you stop seeing yourself as an alcoholic, you see that how your brain is getting fooled when you consume alcohol. You see all that stuff, you see the negative consequences that it causes, and you decide that you're no longer doing this. You're no longer it's much better to say that you'll no longer be an alcoholic, or you'll be alcohol free, than saying I will never consume alcohol again, because your behaviors will follow your identity. What you want to do is you want to shift your identity. When you shift your identity, your behaviors will follow that identity. So you can say, I no longer see any value in consuming alcohol. I'm no longer an alcoholic. I am an alcohol free person. So when you start seeing yourself that, your behaviors will follow. And that will only happen. Obviously, only you can do that. Only you can see uh, the how your brain is getting fooled and all these negative consequences that alcohol has on your life. You have to decide that for yourself. Once you do that, you need a new social group that supports you. And this is very important, because our identity gets reinforced. We get our sense of identity not only from ourselves but also from others, from the people around us. The people around us have a huge influence on how we behave and how we see ourselves. So it's very important for you to find people who are also alcohol free, who do not believe alcohol should be a solution to their negative emotions or a way to celebrate or anything. So that will definitely help. That's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.